It is the very cradle of life, covering 71% of our planet and making up the majority of our own bodies. We are drawn to it naturally. We seek out oceans for our vacations. We build our greatest cities on the banks of mighty rivers, and we find profound peace in the mirror-like reflections of mountain lakes. Water is our ultimate symbol of tranquility and sustenance. But this life-giving compound has a dark, unforgiving side. When the exact right geological, chemical, or human elements align, water stops being a sanctuary and transforms into a predator. There are places on this planet where water environments are so uniquely hostile, so incredibly lethal, that they defy everything we think we know about nature. Tonight, we are stripping away the illusions of sparkling waves and serene shores. We are diving into the terrifying reality of the 5 most dangerous bodies of water on Earth. From streams that swallow people whole without a trace, to lakes that turn the living into stone, to bodies of water capable of wiping out entire towns in a single, silent breath. Prepare to meet the killers hiding in plain sight. The Illusionist, the Bolton Strid. Our journey into the world's deadliest waters does not begin in a remote, uncharted jungle or within the crater of an active volcano. It begins in the picturesque, idyllic countryside of Yorkshire, England. Here, surrounded by ancient abbeys, rolling emerald hills, and popular hiking trails, flows the River Wharfe. It is beautiful, serene, and roughly 30 feet wide, flowing gently over smooth pebbles. But as this river approaches a wooded area near Bolton Abbey, it undergoes a terrifying transformation. The wide, gentle river suddenly hits a geological bottleneck. The 30-foot span of water is violently forced into a narrow chasm that, at its narrowest point, is barely 6 feet across. To the untrained eye, this section, known as the Bolton Strid, looks like a quaint, babbling brook. It looks so narrow, in fact, that you might be tempted to jump across it. For centuries, people have tried. And for centuries, the Strid has claimed them. The Bolton Strid carries a reputed mortality rate of 100%. It is widely believed that no one who has ever fallen in has lived to tell the tale. Many of the bodies are never recovered. To understand why a 6-foot gap in the rocks is so lethal, you have to understand the geology hiding completely out of sight. You are not looking at a small stream. You are looking at the entire volume and power of the River Wharfe, flipped on its side. Because the rock here is soft limestone, thousands of years of immense hydraulic pressure have not widened the river, but instead carved deeply downward. Beneath the deceptively narrow surface lies a cavernous, subterranean labyrinth of tunnels, undercuts, and massive potholes. If you lose your footing on the slippery, moss-covered rocks and fall into the Strid, you are not simply swept downstream. You are immediately sucked downward into an intricate, underwater cave system. The downdrafts and cross-currents are so incredibly powerful that even an Olympic swimmer would be instantly overpowered. You become trapped in a pitch-black, underwater washing machine, battered relentlessly against smooth limestone walls, and pinned in the darkness by the crushing weight of an entire river. The profound danger of the Bolton Strid lies entirely in its deception. It begs to be jumped. It looks like a fairy tale, but it operates like a liquid black hole. It is nature's ultimate optical illusion, a merciless monster masquerading as a puddle. The Medusa, Lake Natron. We leave the damp, green deception of England for the unforgiving, sweltering heat of the Great Rift Valley in East Africa. Here, in northern Tanzania, the danger does not hide beneath the surface. It announces itself in the most visceral, terrifying way possible. Imagine a massive, shallow body of water that is an unnatural, vivid, and terrifying shade of crimson red, marbled with cracked white crusts of salt. This is Lake Natron, a place so toxic and caustic that it has earned a mythical, almost supernatural reputation, the lake that turns animals to stone. Lake Natron is a terminal lake, meaning water flows into it, but it cannot flow out. Surrounded by an intensely hot, arid environment, the only way water escapes is through rapid evaporation. As the water evaporates, it leaves behind insanely high concentrations of a mineral called natron, a natural mixture of sodium carbonate and baking soda. The nearby volcano, Oldoño Lengai, is the only volcano on Earth that erupts a specific, highly unusual type of nitrocarbonatite lava. When the ash and minerals from this volcano wash down into the lake, they turn it into a giant natural cauldron of chemical bleach. The water here can reach temperatures of 140 degrees Fahrenheit or 60 degrees Celsius. But the heat is the least of your worries. The alkalinity of Lake Natron can push past a pH of 10.5, sometimes reaching 12. To put that into perspective, that is more alkaline than household ammonia. The water is corrosive enough to strip ink off a printed page, inflict severe chemical burns on the skin of unadapted creatures, and blind any animal unfortunate enough to dive beneath its surface. When migratory birds or bats crash land into the lake, often confused by the glass-like surface perfectly reflecting the sky, they die rapidly. The extreme levels of sodium carbonate act as a supernatural preservative. It is, in fact, the exact same chemical compound the ancient Egyptians used in their mummification process. The animals are flash mummified, calcified into eerie, statuesque monuments to the lake's lethal chemistry. Yet nature is full of spectacular paradoxes. The blood-red color of the lake comes from cyanobacteria, extremophile organisms that somehow thrive in this deadly alkaline soup. And ironically, the world's most caustic lake is the primary breeding ground for 2.5 million lesser flamingos. Over millennia, these birds have evolved tough, leathery, scale-like skin on their legs to withstand the chemical burns. They build their nests out of the caustic mud on isolated salt islands, where absolutely no predator dares to follow them. To us, and to almost everything else on Earth, Lake Natron is a toxic, burning wasteland. To the flamingos, it is an impenetrable fortress of solitude. The invisible killer, Lake Karachai. Our next location is chilling proof that sometimes the deadliest waters on our planet are not created by shifting tectonic plates, soft limestone, or ancient volcanic geology. Sometimes the monsters are entirely man-made. Hidden deep within the southern Ural Mountains of Russia lies a place that for decades did not even exist on any official map. It was the site of the Mayak Production Association, one of the Soviet Union's largest, most vital, and most secretive nuclear weapons facilities. And sitting quietly next to this sprawling industrial complex was a small, unassuming lake named Karachai. During the frantic height of the Cold War, the desperate race for nuclear supremacy entirely blinded nations to the realities of environmental catastrophe. From 1951 onward, the Mayak facility used Lake Karachai as a direct, unlined dumping ground for highly radioactive liquid waste. It was a tragic philosophy of out of sight, out of mind. The numbers associated with Lake Karachai are difficult to comprehend. It is estimated that they dumped over 4 exabecquerels of radioactivity into this tiny lake. To put that staggering figure into perspective, the total amount of radiation released into the lake was roughly comparable to the entire atmospheric release of the Chernobyl disaster, but concentrated into a body of water less than a single square mile in size. In 1990, scientists finally gained access to measure the radiation levels standing right on the shores of Lake Karachai. The readings they took were horrifying: 600 roentgens per hour. If you were to simply stand on the shore of Lake Karachai in 1990, just looking out at the water, within 5 minutes, you would receive a lethal dose of radiation. Within an hour, you would be guaranteed a painful, agonizing death from acute radiation sickness. You didn't even have to touch the water. The very air around it had been weaponized. The true cascading terror of Karachai was unleashed upon the world in 1967. A severe regional drought caused the lake to partially dry up, exposing the radioactive sediment along the shoreline. A strong wind swept through the valley, picking up dust laced heavily with cesium-137 and strontium-90. This massive radioactive plume blew across the region, irradiating an estimated 500,000 people in the surrounding unsuspecting villages. Today, you cannot swim in Lake Karachai. You cannot even see it. Between 1978 and 2015, the Russian government spent decades attempting to undo the damage, ultimately deciding to fill the entire lake with 10,000 hollow concrete blocks, sealing it permanently beneath thousands of tons of rock and soil to stop the radioactive sediment from ever shifting again. The deadliest lake in human history has been buried alive. But deep down in the dark, the invisible killer still radiates, locked in a concrete tomb where it will remain toxic for thousands of years to come. The sirens call, the blue hole. From the toxic and the violently radioactive, we return to the devastatingly beautiful. The Red Sea, located off the coast of the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt, is an international mecca for scuba divers. The water is incredibly warm, the visibility is near perfect, and the vibrant marine life is unparalleled. But just offshore, near the small town of Dahab, lies a submarine sinkhole known as the Blue Hole. Viewed from above, in the middle of a shallow, bright turquoise coral reef, there is a perfect, terrifying circle of deep, inky indigo. It looks like a massive dark pupil staring blindly up from the ocean floor. It drops almost straight down to a depth of roughly 390 feet. It is breathtaking to behold, and it has claimed the lives of an estimated 130 to 200 divers, earning it the grim, unshakable moniker, the Divers' Cemetery. The sinkhole itself, simply as a body of water, is not inherently dangerous. If you dive straight down and come straight back up, it is a calm, current-free dive. The danger lies in a specific geological feature located 184 feet down, known simply as the Arch. The Arch is a 90-foot-long underwater tunnel that connects the deep sinkhole directly out to the open ocean. For highly trained technical divers, swimming through it is a badge of honor. But for recreational divers, it is a fatal temptation. The primary problem is the light. When you are inside the dark sinkhole looking toward the Arch, the crystal-clear water of the Red Sea plays cruel tricks on human depth perception. The faint glowing blue light at the end of the tunnel makes it look like it's only a short, easy swim. Divers think, I can make that. But it's an illusion. The tunnel is much longer than it appears. And worse, the ceiling of the tunnel drops downward, forcing the diver to swim even deeper to get through. At almost 200 feet deep, a recreational diver using standard compressed air faces a physiological nightmare: nitrogen narcosis. Under the extreme physical pressure of deep water, the nitrogen in a diver's scuba tank becomes deeply toxic to the human brain. It acts like a potent, fast-acting anesthetic. Divers commonly describe it as the martini effect. Every 33 feet of depth feels the equivalent of drinking one dry martini on an empty stomach. By the time an untrained diver reaches the entrance to the Arch, they are heavily, profoundly intoxicated. Judgment completely vanishes. A strange, sleepy euphoria sets in, which is often rapidly followed by blinding, uncontrollable panic. Divers lose their sense of up and down. They swim against the tunnel's currents, breathing heavily, burning through their limited air supply at an alarming rate. As they go deeper, oxygen toxicity can cause violent physical seizures. Ultimately, they slip into unconsciousness, sinking away into the abyss. The Blue Hole does not actively hunt. It does not pull you in like the Bolton Strid. It simply waits. It is a modern-day siren's call of deep, glowing blue light, drawing the overconfident, the curious, and the intoxicated into an eternal sleep. The ticking time bomb, Lake Nyos. Our final destination takes us to a place where water performed an act of violence so devastating, so completely incomprehensible, that for days afterward, the world's top scientists had absolutely no idea what had caused it. It was the perfect murder, committed by a serene mountain lake. In the lush, verdant mountains of northwestern Cameroon, tiny, vibrant villages dot the landscape around the Oku volcanic field. It is a peaceful, agrarian life. But on the morning of August 22, 1986, people arriving from neighboring towns walked into an apocalyptic nightmare. Almost every living creature within a 15-mile radius of Lake Nyos was dead. 1,746 people had perished in their sleep. 3,500 livestock lay dead in the fields, perfectly intact. There was no blood. There were no signs of struggle. There was no structural damage to the buildings, no fires, and no blast craters. Birds had literally dropped out of the sky. It was as if an invisible scythe had swept through the valley, silently harvesting souls and leaving everything else entirely untouched. When geologists finally arrived to investigate, they noticed two highly unusual things about the nearby Lake Nyos. The normally crystal blue water had turned a murky, muddy red, and the overall water level of the massive lake had inexplicably dropped by over 3 feet. Lake Nyos is a crater lake, sitting directly over a dormant volcano. But unlike most normal lakes where the water naturally circulates and mixes, the waters of Nyos are stratified. The warm water stays on top, and the freezing cold water stays on the bottom. Over hundreds of years, Massive amounts of carbon dioxide gas, constantly leaking from the volcanic magma plumbing deep within the earth, became trapped in the deep, cold bottom layers of the lake. The immense physical pressure of the water above held the gas down, exactly like a cork in a shaken champagne bottle. On the night of August 21st, something disturbed the lake. Scientists debate whether it was a small landslide off the crater wall or perhaps unusually heavy rainfall. Whatever the trigger was, it breached the barrier. The deep, gas-rich water was violently thrust upward. As it rose and the water pressure dropped, the dissolved carbon dioxide aggressively exploded out of the water. This extremely rare geological phenomenon is known as a limnic eruption. The lake quite literally exploded, exhaling a 160-foot-tall cloud of pure, concentrated carbon dioxide. Because carbon dioxide is significantly heavier than the oxygen we breathe, the massive gas cloud didn't float up into the atmosphere. It hugged the ground. Moving at roughly 30 miles per hour, an invisible, silent tsunami of suffocating gas poured over the crater lip and flowed down the mountainside directly into the sleeping villages below. The dense gas cloud physically pushed all the breathable oxygen out of the valley. The villagers, asleep in their beds, simply stopped breathing. The utter silence of the event was the most terrifying part. It was a disaster of biblical proportions, perpetrated by a single, catastrophic exhalation from a mountain lake. Today, Lake Nyos is artificially degassed. Engineers have installed massive, continuous pipes that siphon the dangerous deep water to the surface, allowing the volcanic gas to escape slowly and safely into the atmosphere. But the underlying fear remains. There are other lakes in the world with similar geology. Lakes that are quietly, patiently filling with gas in the dark, waiting for the cork to pop. Water. We master it to build our civilizations. We harness its currents to power our nations. We bottle it, we bathe in it, and we depend on it to survive. It is so ubiquitous, so fundamental to the very concept of our daily lives, that we easily forget it is an ancient force of nature, bound by no moral code, and harboring a destructive power we can barely comprehend. The Bolton Strid reminds us that lethal power can hide in the most idyllic, beautiful places. Lake Natron shows us that nature's chemistry is far more brutal and alien than any fiction we could write. Lake Karachai stands as a bleak monument to our own human hubris and the permanent toxic scars we leave behind on the earth. The blue hole proves that our own psychology and overconfidence are often our deadliest enemies. And Lake Nyos serves as a grim, silent warning that the earth beneath our feet is a sleeping giant, breathing quietly until the day it decides to wake. The next time you stand on a shore, watching the gentle ripples of a lake, or listening to a peaceful river carve its way through the woods, take a moment to look a little closer. Respect the boundary between our world and the aquatic realm, because beneath that shimmering, reflective surface, you truly never know what might be waiting.